You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong, all on Georgia Radio Network.
Welcome to episode 65 of the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast. Across the table is my partner in crime, blogger, writer, reporter, TV personality, and the bee in Brooklet's bonnet, Jessica Szilagyi.
Hey, everyone.
Do the intros keep getting better?
Yes, that was fantastic.
I like the bee in the bonnet.
I might cut that out for my intro, or anytime I walk into a Brooklet meeting, I might just blast that on a stereo on my shoulder.
No, I think you should go dressed as the little girl from the Blind Melon commercial, the tap shoes and the bumblebee outfit.
Just buzz periodically throughout the meeting.
Yeah, just tap dance periodically through the meeting. As we record this, the news has broken recently on the 38 count indictment of Jim Beck. And we recently got the news that Governor Kemp has asked him to resign. By the time the show is produced and drops on Monday, there may be, and I'm sure there will be, some different news.
So this is one of those stories, when I saw that he had been indicted, it was kind of like, holy cow, someone's been indicted by a federal grand jury on 38 counts, by the way. But when you saw which elected official it was, you're kind of like, kind of saw that coming.
Well, of course I follow your threads and all that stuff. And people say, you can indict a ham sandwich. No. Not in federal court. U.S. district attorneys bat for average. And I know how much you love sports ball and analogies. They don't...
You want a 1.00, I believe.
Right. They don't keep their job by losing cases. So in that vein, they will walk away from a probable crime to make sure that they can prosecute one that is one they're going to win.
Well, you're right. And I think there's a couple things working in the favor of the U.S. Attorney's Office here. First of all, well, generally speaking, like you said, they are more rock solid than perhaps the GBI or local law enforcement, because by the time the feds indict, they've already conducted their investigation and they're ready to go to trial, or they're ready to accept a plea. Whereas like the GBI or local law enforcement, they charge you and then they might charge you with something different or change the charges, and they continue investigating, and they're kind of doing that all the way up to the trial, which gets continued and over. So this is totally different. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is not Bob Kraft. Bob Kraft had his video thrown out. And that is the difference between a $60,000 a year lawyer in the DA's office and a $10 million retainer. That's local and that's state. If the feds are people who put, what's her name, the cooking person, in prison.
Martha?
Yes, Martha. Yeah, she and Snoop Dogg are together. One of them is a felon, and it's not Snoop. They put Madoff in. I mean, Madoff had plenty of money to mount a defense. They didn't indict him with the idea that they're going to go to trial and figure this out. So I would certainly say these are all allegations, but they are very, very, very serious.
Sure, and we're both proponents, and we'll stand behind innocent, not just until proven, but unless proven guilty. I mean, there is no phrase, I think, other than maybe shall not be infringed, that's more important to our constitutional rights. But at the same time, these charges, another aspect of this that I don't think is working in Beck's favor is that these charges aren't those, elusive, sometimes hard to pinpoint charges. They're pretty money laundering. Those things are easy to prove. Fraud. I mean, they're concrete.
This is not obstruction.
Right.
Where, did you lie to an investigator? Did you falsely remember something. No, these are crimes.
There's a paper trail. There's money trails. It's provable. It's concrete. And then, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, see, we're just talking off the air about not stepping on each other, and here I am. No,
we're just so excited about
Well,
one of our elected officials going to jail.
Your coworker Dale Russell is an investigative reporter. In my limited experience with him, he is super fair. Mm-hmm. He wants the truth. He wants the facts, but he's not one of these guys that's out to get you. I sat in an interview with him as an observer for my candidate for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And there was lots of stuff that he could have falsified and no one would have ever known. So much that we talked about hiding a camera just to catch him in case he was. And that's not his brand of journalism. So when he was investigating Beck before the election on double dipping and things like that, and Beck ran out of the interview, Dale's a very reasonable guy. I say Dale like we're buddies. Dale Russell's a very reasonable guy. Like I tend to believe his reporting over, some of the sensationalist stuff that you see coming out, especially with local news.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a reason he has a Peabody Award. I mean...
You don't?
I don't, but there's still time. I'm only 30.
For a few more months.
I know.
I asked Jessica if we think we could get Dale on the show. She's like, no.
I mean, not to I don't know. He's just a really big deal. I don't know. And I know him, and when I see him, I'm like, hi. What are you working on? What story are you working on? He's just good at his job.
Oh, no. I wouldn't. Honestly, I wouldn't ask him because it's one of those things you just don't.
Right.
I wouldn't. When I sent you that text, I sent a laughing thing after it. It was not serious. When we get another 1 million subscribers, then maybe he can come on. But I certainly wouldn't ask anybody to, sully up his reputation by getting on with me. It's bad enough I embarrass you.
Well, but going back to the Jim Beck thing, BJ Pack is the U.S. attorney. And one, for social media reasons, I am so thankful that BJ Pack was a Republican legislator and was appointed by Trump so that people couldn't say that this was a partisan nonsense thing. I am just beyond thankful for that. But I used to work for BJ Pack when he was a state rep. And the guy is brilliant, and he is a phenomenal attorney. He's very smart. He's by the book. And I don't say this about many lawyers, especially on the prosecutor side, but I have full faith in what he has done and what he's chosen to do. And even though they're different layers of government, there is totally a risk associated with coming out against a statewide elected official with indictments like this and moving forward with it and pushing the investigation. And he hasn't wavered, and I can appreciate that. And so, yes, I hope that I would expect nothing less than Beck to maintain his innocence, but it doesn't look good.
Well, let me tell you something. If you're accused of stealing a horse and you have a tail hanging out of your mouth, you plead not guilty. And here's the thing about Pack. It is a huge risk. Not only losing his job, but he would lose his reputation in private practice. He would never get elected again. If these came out to be BS charges, it's one thing if he does some legal maneuvering. That is what it is. But as much as U.S. attorneys are expected to win, and then you throw on top of it being a Georgia guy, if he's willing to put his weenie that close to the bandsaw, he's sure it's not going to get cut.
Right.
So again, these are allegations. They're very, very serious. Speaking of, sorry.
No, I don't know. You're right about all of that. You brought up a point that really triggered something, with a horse's tail hanging out of your mouth. And no, we don't know all the facts and we don't know all of the circumstances around everything. But I think everyone was kind of blown away by the amount of money that Beck spent on his own campaign, because it was over $1 million of his own money. And That's just a lot for an office that will never pay that much unless you're there for decades and decades. So, like I said, in the court of public opinion, which is the worst court there is, I don't see anything working in his favor right now. Nothing.
Well, you don't spend that much on an office paying that little unless you expect to get it out fourfold.
Right.
And that's a line from Brewster's Millions. But that's absolutely the fact. When I see someone spending $500,000 to become a state rep, making $20,000, and you have to do that every 2 years, that person's not planning on doing everything. There are good chances that they are planning on extracurricular activities. Now, on for the transition. Speaking of extracurricular activities, leaked documents allege that the NRA has been spending $100,000 a day on lawyers.
It's a lot of money. So before this story came out, I knew that Oliver North was ousted, and I knew that Carolyn Meadows was put in as the new president, but I hadn't really been paying that close attention to why. Have you been following it? No,
the NRA really lost me with the bump stock ban. A couple other things the NRA has done that has not made me very happy, because they seem to think that a little bit of infringement is cool. As long,
sure.
Yeah. So
they're too complacent.
Yeah, and they're also known in the firearms community as the country's oldest gun control organization. But anyway, no, I had heard that there's, just like you, when the story broke on New York Times.
There's which story?
The latest one that
with the money.
Yep.
I don't know who broke that, but basically, they're saying, this is pretty consistent across sources, that Oliver North was pushed out as president because he was trying to he had accused the CEO of financial impropriety, and there was this back and forth between, basically a power struggle, and the CEO, which is Wayne LaPierre, got to the board before North did, and so they pushed North out. We don't know all the truth about that, but it had to do with allegations of financial impropriety. And then these memos are leaked saying that they had $24 million in legal fees, which is hard to even comprehend, even with the best and the brightest. And then there were some other things like expensive trips and clothing that was paid for out of NRA expense accounts.
Yeah, so they paid a single attorney $18.5 million in 1 year. LaPierre was charging tens of thousands of dollars, almost $40,000 for shopping for clothing in Beverly Hills. Charged $18,000 for a car and driver in Europe. Another almost $14,000 for his summer intern's rent. More than $500,000 in clothes, travel, and other expenses, working for a nonprofit. Now, certainly the NRA is not alone in having nonprofit CEOs taking advantage of their position, but I will tell you that Ollie North is a good man.
Sure.
He was I hate to say good soldier because he was a Marine, but in the Reagan administration, he was a good soldier, and he was the fall guy in the Iran-Contra affair. And he took his medicine and stood up and took it well. Ollie North is a good man. And I certainly don't think that North showed up and 2 years or whatever it was later decided that he's going to stage a coup at the NRA, an organization that he loved. So, again, these are allegations, just like the Jim Beck story. But, man, if you put those two guys side by side, if I have to throw my chips behind somebody, it's going to be Ollie North.
Right. And just like most of these types of stories, there's so many different, veins that it branches off into, because you have the loyalty and the people that you would trust just from what you've seen of them. And then you also have the actual legal fees that is alarming because it just is. And then you have all the other expenses because the IRS, whether it's for political reasons or not, the IRS is already looking at the NRA, and those types of expenses quite literally could put their nonprofit status in jeopardy. So, I mean, when I read the stories, and I read a few of them, I'm inclined to think that Oliver North or somebody close to him leaked the memo. I support leaking memos because that's how I get a lot of my information, so I don't have a problem with it. And he, obviously, if he wrote it, no one is in a better position to leak it than him. But he stands to benefit because of what they've done to his reputation from leaking the memo.
And that's exactly what I was going to say is this is not governmental. This is a public nonprofit, and they impugned his integrity. And if he leaked it or somebody close to him, this is not like him leaking government, classified information. This is him defending his reputation, which he absolutely has a right and an obligation to everybody who sends money to the NRA to do. You should have an idea, like with Charity Tracker, to know where that money's going.
Right.
And if it's going to put clothes on Wayne LaPierre's back, that's gonna damage their reputation with their members.
Well, and the new president, Meadows, who is from Georgia, I mean, I know that her responsibility is to protect the NRA and back them, but I think she went a little too far. I mean, it's one thing to back your CEO because you want to back who you have to work with, but saying that it's, stale news and about personal agendas and all of this and leaking information is about personal agendas. I mean, yes, it would be vindication for a former president who was ousted under weird terms. I mean, yes, that is vindication for him. But like you said, people have a right to know where their money's going. And you would think that the NRA, if it's not true, would want to refute it so that people have confidence in their donation.
Well, I think stale is an important word here. Stale news, not false, not inaccurate, not a lie. Stale news. In other words, we all know he's embezzling. That's old news. Man, I don't know what all she's privy to, but a person in her position, she should have some personal integrity not to go out there and do that, to put her name next to, quote, say that this is not a big deal, that this is all personal. Well, you call me a liar, and then when I prove you wrong, you're going to say it's personal?
Yeah.
Up yours, lady.
I'm inclined to agree.
Yeah, yeah. More Violence Against Women by Dave.
I endorse it. Even though these opinions are our opinions and not those of all in Georgia, I support your opinion.
Well done.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to get that in early since we've been leaving into the last 30 seconds of the show.
You say we when you really mean me.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where you can't fire me and I can't fire you, so all I can do is publicly hold you accountable.
You could fire me any day. You're the person with any followers.
Sure.
True.
It is not true.
Know your role, Dave. So a new public housing rule could put 55,000 children out of a home. Now that's an inflammatory headline. Well,
in their defense on this kind of thing, if you just put new housing rule proposed by HUD, like literally no one's going to click it. So.
Oh, no. It's the out of a home that I thought was interesting. But yeah. So this new housing rule, you're going to have to correct me where I'm wrong, only families in which every member is a legal resident or citizen would qualify. Well, a citizen would be a legal resident. 25,000 households for a total of 108,000 people in subsidized housing have at least one person who would be ineligible. In other words, illegal.
Okay, so in my probably among the most sensitive positions I hold, I don't care. We all suffer the sins of our fathers and mothers, and if the quote crime was anything different, we wouldn't look at it any differently. The kids, no, it's not their fault, but if parents don't pay their rent at regular housing facilities, they get evicted, and we don't shout about it just because there's children involved, you know? And the simple solution is to kick the person who's ineligible out. I mean, if you're eligible, I don't agree with public housing, and I would love to see it non-existent, but since we're operating in a world where it is existing, get rid of the ineligible person.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing. It is repugnant to taxpayers in this country that someone would jump the border and immediately start collecting benefits. And we say benefits, and that's a really polite way of saying stealing from the American people. I don't have a problem with the rule. I'm with you on public housing. It should not exist. I also believe that with, the war on poverty is an abject failure. And it was never a war on poverty. It was always a war on the Republican Party. It was a way of buying off Democrats, and that goes back to LBJ. But I don't think you can find anybody outside of maybe some intellectual types that think this is a good idea. Those hard hat Democrats, as one of my favorite presidents called him, Richard Milhouse Nixon, those guys are hard-working blue-collar people, and they do not want to see their taxes stolen from them and given to people who add nothing to the society besides hopping the fence and having a baby.
Well, and I don't... Even if you just are a bleeding heart, how can you say that these people who aren't citizens should receive these benefits when we have veterans and homeless people on the streets who could benefit from these types of programs?
Most homeless are homeless because of a couple reasons. One is drug addiction, making them incapable, or two, they have mental illness. There are, and as much as I don't like government programs, but there are so many nonprofits, government programs that can get you off the street, whether you're a veteran or just down in your luck, that, I don't like the idea of, well, we can do that, give that to people sleeping under bridges. Well, how about just give that money back to the American taxpayer who's paying for it?
Oh, I totally agree.
Oh, I know you do.
100%.
I know you do. And I know what you're saying is you gave us the bleeding heart argument is, well, why if you're going to take that money and give it to people, want to give it to people who, well, one, have contributed so much to the society.
Right. Or at least are legal, lawful citizens. I mean, it's the same. I'm opposed to foreign aid, but it's the same concept. Like, I put an article out, I think last week, where we sent like $5 million to Colombia to help women in the agriculture fields down there. And I'm like, okay, first of all, our own state senators, our U.S. senators are complaining about the fact that we're not giving disaster aid from Hurricane Michael and this, that, and the other, yet we're sending money to other countries. It's the same thing, except it's happening here on our soil. I don't want you to rob me to let me voluntarily help my neighbors. But if you're going to steal from me, help my actual neighbors.
Yeah, the foreign aid argument is, It's one that comes around every 4 years, and it never changes. And part of foreign aid is buying cooperation, especially in Colombia, because we're using Colombia as a proxy against the Venezuelans, the Maduro regime.
It's working really well.
There are U.S. special operations on the ground, and there is a certain PSYOP mission going on right now. I do not want any troops on the ground in Venezuela. I remember Mogadishu. And anybody who says we should go in there and affect regime change, go watch Black Hawk Down again. That was a humanitarian mission too.
Speaking of Black Hawk Down, not too long ago, I couldn't sleep. It was like midnight. I started it, and of course, like an hour and 45 minutes in, I was like, son of a gun, why did I start this so late? Because you can't just stop in the middle of the movie, even though I knew what was going to happen.
No, you can't. It angers the blood.
Yes.
And I've worked with some of the guys who ran the Mogadishu Mile, and that's the loving name given to what those Rangers and Special Operations soldiers had to do when they didn't have enough vehicles was hoof it. After fighting all day, all night, limited water, exhausted, is run out. And it's one of the reasons that the standards for physical fitness are so high in combat units is after everything happened, they had to run out. So yeah, we're getting off on a tangent. You and I are making up for Matt and I for sure, getting off on a hog trail. But yeah, that's one that angers the blood. But just look at that. Look at things like that. That was humanitarian also. We were doing the nice thing for nice people who just wanted help. And we had no place being there. So, but that's that. Oh, God, Marty, that's not even, Venezuela wasn't even on the damn sheet.
I know.
But anyway.
Neither was Black Hawk Down, but, now I'm thinking about how I couldn't even go to sleep after the movie was over because I was so ticked, and then you started talking about it, and we need to move on. Yeah,
and now you're not going to sleep all night. You sit, right. The stories coming out are going to be angrier now that I angered the blood. But, yeah, we're, super good radio is we agree that it shouldn't exist to begin with, and if it's going to, charity starts at home. And if these handouts weren't there, the crisis on the border would be a lot less. I have to believe that if there's nothing to come here and get for free, there'd be no reason to go throwing 3-year-old children over the wall. Yeah, it sounds like Game of Thrones. Speaking of Game of Thrones, Kemp has swung his sword and has lopped the heads off 14 total bills and vetoed, if my alliterative comments aren't just, awful. I'm bad tonight. I'm sorry. I'm bad tonight. I'm usually a little more witty.
It's okay.
It's okay. You're like, yeah, you're not too bright. It's all right. So, the recess bill, HB 83.
I mean, we all talked about it, that we understood that it was a local control issue. But again, my argument, this is one that irritates me that he didn't sign it. He said this legislation would impose unreasonable burdens on educational leaders without meaningful justification. That's an opinion. And I don't think we should govern off of opinions. If we want to talk about science and facts, those show that kids, especially K through 5, do better when they have breaks throughout the day. And out of all of the things that we force down public school throats, I don't understand why we couldn't mandate 30 minutes a day of recess. So I'm super mad about that one. And it's the third time. I mean, it never got this far. The last 2 years before this, it only made it to out of the House. So I hope that, I don't know. Maybe Richard Woods can impose a rule that is regulatory, but not a law. I don't know.
Well, first of all, we have the votes. I say we because I supported this bill to override the veto. Mm-hmm. Now, whether or not they will have the legislative integrity to attempt to piss off another branch of government, which is the exact reason we have three branches of government, is so they cannot get along. Man, firm believer in local control, especially in education. Are you effing kidding me? Are you kidding me? This is where you draw the line? Telling them what they can feed, how to teach math, what hours to go, and everything else they have to do in order to get Uncle Sugar's money, and you draw the line at recess? You self-righteous prick.
I think it would be fantastic if, imagine the national, because this did get national headlines that he vetoed this, but imagine the national headlines that, because it's so rare that the legislature overrides a veto, but that they did over recess. Like, that would be a win for the people. Like, really stick it to him for recess.
And I had the local school governments here going, local control, local control. You know what? I'm all for local control. Tell the feds to stick their money, tell the state to stick their money, and tell parents to educate their own damn kids. I'm all for that. I'm all for parents having complete control over the education of their kids. Educate your own kids. Don't leave it to the government. I'm absolutely for local control. But if we're going to put state standards on things, we're going to tell the schools what books they have to buy, what books they cannot buy. And then you're going to draw the line at recess, at K through 5 recess. And that's where he's going to take the stand to small government.
Right. And I don't know. Local control is for implementation, not for administration. We have state standards for a reason. Most people are okay with the State Department of Education. They wish the U.S. Department of Education would be eliminated, which I support too. But you have a state, it trickles down for a reason. It's a constitutional right in the state, which is to provide public education, which is why we have a state agency to administer it. So if the state tells you to do something and it's a constitutional requirement, freaking do it.
It's all about, first of all, that's all about money. If the local governments will do whatever the state wants them to do, as long as they keep getting that money trickle in. Somebody got to Kemp on this. I don't know who it was. And I'm not talking about threatening. I'm talking about as far as supporting him in 4 years. God, I can't talk tonight. But somebody said, hey, listen, if you do this, the teachers are going to rebel against you. The local governments are going to rebel against you. Something happened like that. This has nothing to do with being a, quote, firm supporter of local control. That's a crock of shit. And, man, I don't know. That's, we covered this pretty well in previous episodes on the recess bill. There's nothing bad happens letting kids get their wiggles out. There's nothing bad happens with giving the kids a little exercise. And next week they'll be hammering on childhood obesity.
It's not one of those things that is just for campaign mailers or talking points or a problem or a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. It is a real problem. There are school districts that offer 10 to 15 minutes a couple days a week. If a child misbehaves, they punish them and tell them they can't have recess. There's all these excuses, all these reasons. If the teacher doesn't want to do it, they don't have to. It's up to the teacher. And it's a real problem that this could have helped. And I think it's one of two that makes me the most mad.
Well, and I've heard punishments go for recess as you're not going to go play on the playground, but you're going to walk the track or whatever it is. At least they're getting exercise if they don't do all their work or whatever. But I really think this is this is one he missed. I would like to see the legislators come in here and in January and override the veto. I don't think they will because most of them are too busy licking Kemp's boots and trying to, quote, get along so they can get their little signature piece of legislation pushed through. Just like Kemp has floor leaders, which the executive branch has no place having floor leaders in another branch of government. I don't know. We can get on a bunch of that, but yeah, his reasoning is flawed, if not an outright lie. Waiver of sovereign immunity, 311. Good band. This was an Andy Welch bill, as I recall.
Boo.
I was hoping to get him as a guest on this one, but boo.
Maybe you guys can meet for coffee instead.
Be like, you get the stench of Szilagyi around you. You've been talking to her, haven't you?
Right. I mean, the bill is a great bill, and I'm ticked that it was vetoed, but Andy Welch just sucks. But basically, we talked about this one too. It would open the courthouse doors and allow citizens to sue their local, county, and state government over ordinances and statutes they find unconstitutional. Something we are not allowed to do right now. Right now, as per the Constitution, they have to tell us, they have to give us permission to sue. And it sounds outrageous, but that's how it is. And it's not for money. Like, a lot of people were like, oh, that's terrible. It's just going to cost us taxpayers. No, this is about injunctive and declaratory relief. So if you just want the ordinance or the law to not be enforced, if you find it unconstitutional and it gets you in the courtroom. I think that Kemp's, his reasoning was lawmakers need to coordinate more closely with the executive branch to tailor a workable waiver. What he means is that he had to veto this because of the heartbeat bill. Because if the heartbeat bill was signed into law and people found it unconstitutional and they didn't want it to be enforced, there would be lawsuits in every county courthouse across the state suing Kemp and his administration and the legislature and everyone else. So, because they had to take up abortion, and whether you agree with the issue or not, I don't really care. I'm irritated. If they would have waited a year, I would have been better with it if this could have at least gone into effect, because this is far more important. That, I guess that's not fair to say, but because abortion is really important to people, and I'm rambling now, but it's a very important issue. And the fact that it's likely got vetoed simply because another law could have been challenged just sucks to me.
This law passed, if I recall correctly, almost unanimously.
It was unanimous in both chambers.
Well...
oh, no, I'm lying. There were 3 people in the House who didn't support it.
And there was at least a few that were unexcused from the vote.
Right.
Guess. Yes, Vernon Jones missed it.
Vernon.
So, here's the thing. And I know you got on your soapbox with that. Here's the problem I have, and it's on face value. Quote, lawmakers need to coordinate more closely with the executive branch. No, they friggin' don't. Get back in your damn box. They're a separate yet equal branch of government. You don't have to coordinate with the other branches. The branches have their own place. And this is another one I would like to see the legislature put him back in his place. Tell him, you're the executive. You are there to enforce the laws that we pass, and you'll enforce this one too, son. It's absolutely embarrassing that his quote is, lawmakers need to coordinate more closely with the executive branch. That's exactly what our founding fathers did not want. When you merge the executive and legislative branch, you have 2 branches of government. And that's where we find ourselves in the federal government too, is you've got these kind of mingled branches. Then you have the legislative. And then we all expect the justices to legislate from the bench. No. You need to go sit in the mansion and wait for the bills to come across your desk. If you want to veto them, answer to the people for it. And the people who have elected their representatives should expect their representatives to override this veto. It passed damn near unanimously. There's no good reason for them not to take this back up and shove it back down Kemp's throat.
I feel strongly, after reading all of the bills that I did, I feel strongly that it was the most public-oriented bill of session, which is ironic coming from the sponsor of the bill to limit the media and the First Amendment. But, it's truly something that can impact and help every Georgian in the state, every Georgian would have the ability to take on a local government or a state without having to go through the process of asking the courts to say, sure, you can sue, which costs money and slows down the process and oftentimes errs on the side of the loss for the people. It's beyond me. It's selfish. And if I didn't have enough problems with the way that Kemp handled the heartbeat bill and everything else related to it and the way his administration has done a few things, this was just the nail in the coffin for me in terms of self-interested and personally oriented moves. I'm just not a fan.
Yeah, well, we're simpatico on that. All right, SB 15, school safety. Kemp called it an unfounded mandate and said he vetoed it after concerns of school officials and advocates.
I think this was a good veto. I know it sounds terrible that he vetoed school safety, but we talked about it on the show. I had it listed as one of the worst bills of the session because when I was in school, if someone got caught with a joint in the bathroom, they called your parents and they suspended you and you went home for a few days and you came back and you got your crap together. This would, for any type of criminal activity, it would involve law enforcement. So you're quite literally involving or putting kids in the system at earlier ages on things that administrators and parents have handled for decades just fine. And the intention obviously was to go after plots of school shootings and other violent activity, but it wasn't narrowly tailored. And so I was against the bill all the way along, and I'm glad that it was vetoed.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's a good veto. It certainly does not have the votes to override this veto, which I'm glad it doesn't. It was in the House 110 to 56, 42 to 11 in the Senate on April 2nd. 6 non-votes in the House, 8 excused, 2 non-vote, and 1 excused in the Senate. They won't have this bill's dead as far as I'm concerned, and unless they go back to the drawing board and fix some of those issues.
And in their defense, they did allocate a considerable amount of extra money for safety grants to each school district based on population in the amended budget for this year, or I guess last year's amended budget that's ending June 30th of this year. And a lot of the districts have already done things to improve school safety. They could, do what they wanted because local control. They could, buy alert systems or secure their doors or build a wall, whatever the hell they wanted. So it's not like they just turned their backs on the fact that this is a national issue and a growing concern for parents. It's just not putting kids in the pipeline to prison because of a joint or a fight in the bathroom.
It also does something that I have a personal pet peeve with, which is naming things, the protection of puppies and unicorns. Mm-hmm. Because when you veto something like school safety, you really come off like an asshole. And the average person is not going to go in and read the meat of the bill like you do, like we discuss here. This was a good veto. It was the right veto. I know some of the legislators that proposed this one. They're not. I think it was well intentioned. I think it was very poorly executed. It went into the sausage grinder and came out, Vienna sausage instead of bratwurst. So I think it was a good veto. Again, awesome radio. We agree.
Woo!
And next on the big line of executive veto is SB 120, fiscal analysis of tax credits before they could be renewed by the legislature. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, please go.
I was just going to say this was one of those kind of like school safety that really evolved as it went through, and it was watered down a lot. So it's interesting that it got vetoed because it wasn't what it started, and Kemp wanted it to go further. But it was much more comprehensive and had like a 5-year plan for all of our tax credits and reevaluating them.
couple things that Kemp has been really good on, and I know I hammered him, but where he has been good in his box was making the IG head of investigating internal problems within the various departments. Accountability is a big thing, I think, with Governor Kemp. So I don't think this was. I think you're absolutely right. I don't think this was vetoed because he doesn't want financial analysis. I think you're right. I think he wants something a little more teeth, a little more involved into figuring out what's going on.
So I agree. And I do think that his veto was well-intentioned, but he did note that he wished, or one of the things he wanted was an independent auditor for an objective review. And again, I am a huge proponent of that and support it. But if we are going to go that route, we don't need a State Department of audits and accounts because that's quite literally what they're for. And so if we want, I don't understand why tax credits would be any different than every other audit we have done that is within a state agency. So in the interest of consistency, either run it through the State Department of Audits or get rid of that department and outsource everything to a bunch of different firms around the state. But I don't like that that's what his angle was on just this.
No, and I agree. And look, my background before doing Dr. Cool, I was in banking. And you don't audit your own branch.
Right.
You have someone independent come in, even within the same company, someone that's not related to that branch, not the same chain of command, come in and do the audits. In fact, that's how I met my wife. She was writing my branch up. So I'm with you on it. Just for a matter of fact here, it passed 54-0, 2 non-votes, 0 excused in the Senate. House vote, 150 yeas, 9 nays, 4 non-votes, and 17 excused. The votes are there. Should the legislature decide to override the veto, I think. I don't think this is the hill that they're going to die on, but the votes are there to do it.
I agree, and I would love to know the reasons why people were against it, and we don't know. This was one of the ones that came late in the game in terms of the changes. They kind of came up fast on one of the jam-packed days. So I don't know why people would vote against it. It's a tough thing to vote against because, you're basically asking the legislature to be transparent and analytical in handing out credits to special interests. However, no bill, there's no perfect bill. So, except the sovereign immunity bill that can't be vetoed.
So Senate Bill 153, Georgia Trauma Scene Cleanup Bill, involving the GBI.
This is another good veto. This was stupid. It was sponsored by, in the House, the version was sponsored by Alan Powell. It was his idea, and then they had a Senate companion bill, and that's the one that ended up passing. But basically, they wanted to charge people to clean up trauma scenes and then have them regulated and investigated and monitored by the GBI. If you have a trauma scene, the first priority is to get it cleaned up. Who cares if they have a state license or the GBI has approved them? If they're operating and they're qualified to do it, and they're operating as a business in other parts of the state for other reasons, let them clean up the mess. It was stupid. The reason that it got vetoed was that it didn't have the statutory review that is required by state law, so I'm sure it will come back. But it was one of those bills that there were people, of course you have your traditional yes people, but there were people who do vote yes a lot who were like, what? Why do we need this? So I was glad to see it vetoed, even if it's just temporary.
Yeah, I'm not sure why the cleanup needs to be overseen by the GBI. Doing that will make a traumatic event worse, in my opinion. When you have these sort of regulatory burdens, the price of the service naturally has to go up. So when you have a single agency that is giving the blessing to carpet cleaners, painters, people. All right, look. So trauma scenes for the family are really, really, really tough. You just have evidence of your loved one laying in the carpet, laying on the hardwood, splattered all over the wall. The sooner you get it cleaned up, the better. So, and they just went through something, traumatic. It's a trauma scene. So it's already expensive to have that sort of stuff done, especially on short notice when you get phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning to come suck the brains out of your throw rug. This really puts a burden on the survivors' families, I think. I'm with you. I think it's a good veto. I don't think it's a layer of government that we need.
Right. And it doesn't actually do anything for safety, so you can't even argue that.
Right. Moving on to what I think is going to be another one we agree on. SB 80, giving tax dollars to the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame, previously privately funded.
So I think Kemp was pretty direct on this one. He said there is no demonstrated need for state appropriations for this entity to continue to operate because, quite literally, they have been operating for as long as they've been open without tax dollars. I think initially, that's probably actually not true. I think they initially were helped with the state and then they branched off, like the state stopped their funding and they got donations and everything and they're trying to get more money and revert back to being a state-funded thing. But I can't think of anything more than a Hall of Fame about anything that should be government-backed.
Dear sweet baby Jesus, why can't we have this all the time? This quote the quote's outstanding.
Yes.
There is no demonstrated need for state appropriations for this entity, period. Why don't we apply this to a bunch of crap that gets our state appropriated funds? Period. There's no demonstrated need for state appropriations. Done. If that should be written above the well in the House and the Senate, and you know what? I will pay for it personally to have a sign made, and I'll do it tacky too. I'm not going to do it in gold leaf. I want it in neon so this sons of bitches up there can read it. Look like a strip club. It'll get their attention. There's no demonstrated need for state appropriations, period. Sorry.
Preach.
Preach, sister. So SB 103, we're moving through some of these kind of quickly because we're running out of time. Mandating priority parking spaces for veterans at airports.
Yeah, we're running through it because these are not hard to comprehend. Like, you don't need a law requiring that you have a certain number of parking spots at all of our airports around the state for veterans. Like, I support our veterans. I would give you my parking spot, but I don't want it to be a law. And Kemp's argument was there's no law preventing airports from giving veterans special spots if they want to. Like, you don't need a law. If they want to give them priority parking, they can go ahead and erect their own signs that aren't state mandated.
This is stupid.
It's so stupid. Like,
this is stupid. And I know you're kind of treading a line there. This is stupid. If you're a disabled veteran, you have handicap parking. This is stupid. Nobody, your status as a veteran does not give you special privileges. If someone wants to be nice in a private parking lot, whether it's Kroger, Publix, or Food Lion, wants to say parking for pregnant mothers here, parking for veterans here, or they put the, which is very nice, put the Purple Heart parking somewhere, fine. That's a private entity doing something nice. For the state to mandate it, that's stupid. You are asking one citizen to put himself above the other, and that is not the role of government. So that one is just, it passed because you put veterans on it, 53, 2, and 1 in the Senate, 163, 3, 4, and 10 in the House. As soon as you put veterans on it, everybody wants to sign their name to it because no one wants to be the guy that doesn't like veterans.
Well, and I think we had a show that was half bills on veterans back in January or February. I mean, they really went heavy on legislation addressing veterans issues, and some of them were legitimate and some of them were a little overreaching. Some of them were understandable even if you don't think they're proper role of government. And then you have crap like this where you're like, why? Who came to you and said, I'd like my own parking spot at the airport?
Nobody.
Exactly.
Nobody I served with got to the airport. You know what? There should be a special spot for me. Not one. And they would take most of the guys that I know that have serious injuries from service would rather walk or wheel their ass rather than get some special parking spot because they have pride. The same reason I don't get in the, as many times as I've blown my knee apart, I don't ride the cart at Publix. I will walk as long as I'm ambulatory. And most of the guys are like me. Most of the guys and gals are like me on that edge. If this was something to put their names on that says, I'm pro-veteran. And I really hate for veterans to be treated like the PETA commercials, with Sarah McLachlan, Arms the Angels playing in the background, and we're some group that needs a handout from somebody. No, we don't need a special parking place. Be nice if we get rid of the TSA so we're going to make my friggin' flight on time, though.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I said we're getting brief, and then I went on a soapbox with that, but I'll take the slings and arrows from the veterans. Hit me. HR 51 would have created a commission to hash out the disputed boundaries with Tennessee and North Carolina.
So this one was another one I was opposed to because it was a whole lot of if they do this, then we will do this type thing. And Kemp vetoed it because Tennessee and North Carolina didn't create commissions. So we would have a commission to meet with Tennessee and Carolina and literally no one would show up. So I'm not really sure it's one of those things. It was a resolution, non-binding, non-enforceable. They just wanted to sit at the table and talk about the map that was incorrect in 1818. And I feel strongly that if in 201 years they couldn't work it out, that sitting at a table getting compensated per diem isn't going to help them work it out either.
Wait a minute. So there's a gig where I just kind of sit there and talk to nobody and they pay me?
Yes. It's called being a state legislator. But if you're talking about being on this commission, I think that's different.
Look, this is essentially peace talks when only one side is talking. Yeah. You know what? Good job, Governor Kemp. This was stupid. Good veto. Yeah. This was stupid. And not that I expect any less from the Gold Dome, but, we're going to have to get like a stupid meter on these things that when you release the stories, that just shows from green, definitely not stupid, to outright should not be, anybody who penned this should not be allowed in public society. Stupid. All right. SB 53, protecting DeKalb County schools from annexation.
I don't really understand this one. I get it, but I don't know. Whatever. There was a lot of DeKalb legislation. I think Kemp didn't really want to get involved in a lot of it because he vetoed another one down the line.
Right.
For their ethics. So, I don't know. Sorry, DeKalb. Vernon couldn't represent for you. He couldn't finish the drill.
I don't want any bills that are protecting individual counties. All right. HB 598, changing the city boundaries of the city of Harlem, vetoed at the request of the sponsor.
So apparently the bill passed earlier on, and then some things changed inside the politics of Harlem, and the sponsor was like, whoa, I need you to veto it, which I think is kind of funny, but I'm glad they were able to veto it instead of having to wait until next year and
take up more bandwidth with the legislator trying to undo what he did.
Right.
Yeah.
So
all right.
It's just ironic or just funny.
Senate Bill 75, addressing the State Board of Veterinary Medicine. and allowing for monitoring while vets are going through mental/addiction treatment.
This was a terrible bill from the get-go. We don't need to monitor veterinarians who have mental problems or are addicted to anything. If they're impaired or they're having problems, like if they haven't been through the due process part of the licensing board, we don't need to do anything with them. And then the other aspect of it was, sure, if you have mental health information or even addiction information, you don't want that just flowing out to the press. I respect that aspect, but it was going to make like all information related to this monitoring program shielded from open records and open meetings, sunshine laws. So even like statistics or any type of reports that they generate, even with redacted names, wouldn't have been available to the public. And so Kemp didn't like that, and it didn't go through the same statutory process or the review process that the other one we talked about didn't go through.
Again, damn near unanimous. 51-0, 1 non-vote, and 4 excused in the Senate. 165, 1 nay. 9 non-votes with 5 excused in the House. And you say this is a bad bill. The only no was Barr. Timothy Barr, not Bob.
Well, Timothy doesn't get any points for it because he's a co-sponsor of the journalism ethics bill. So sorry, Tim, we're not giving you any points, but maybe next time.
I award you no points.
And may God have mercy
May God have mercy on your soul. All right. HB 187, Obesity Drug Pilot Program.
So this was old Katie Dempsey freaking doing her thing. I mean, it was going to cost money to implement, even though they were going to donate part of the pills and the program. These companies were, but the implementation was going to cost money, and it was going to drive up the cost of employee benefits because you're talking about the pool of insurance and care and everything. And pilot programs, the problem with state pilot programs is they never go away. So again, I was pleased.
Good veto. I mean, yeah, stupid bill, good veto. HB 279, allowing law enforcement to use vehicles while off duty. The quote is, this legislation would create potential liability for the state and negatively affect automotive physical damage insurance programs.
So basically it was, when a law enforcement officer directs school traffic or works a private event, it would allow them to take their car, which, you hear it and you're like, well, they're still acting as a cop. It doesn't seem like a terrible idea, but I was opposed to it for the exact reason he vetoed it, which is liability. I mean, it's the state insurance or the county insurance or whatever it is, whichever agency, it's their insurance that's on the hook if you do something stupid when you're off the clock. So.
And is it just for that?
What do you mean?
I mean, would it allow them to take the car to the grocery store?
Well, see, that's a gray area anyway, because a lot of agencies, local and at the state level, allow them to drive their cars to and from work and things like that. So it's not like you can't do that. But I think the whole argument was, if you're working private security at a concert, should you have your vehicle there? The state says no.
Well, I mean, there are some side gigs which I think it's helpful, especially road construction, having a vehicle with the blue lights going.
Mm-hmm.
I think there should, at very least, be compensation back for the fuel that's consumed. And I know that seems like a small thing, but you're working a side gig, man.
And those cars run all the time.
I was discussing that with a friend of mine today. And during the fuel crisis, that a lot of these guys are running their vehicles just because they don't have to pay for the fuel, and they don't want to get into a hot car. I mean, yeah, because there's no whatever. Anyway, I think it's a decent veto. I think there could be some department policies that come in there with that, saying the exact same thing. Is like on I-20 with all the deaths, is having a police vehicle with blue lights because people tend to slow down when they see it. I think that's fine. But I certainly don't want, just like I'm an employer, my guys drive my vehicles. I don't want them going to pick their kids up at school in it. I don't want them doing their errands with it. So anyway, it was a good veto on the way that bill was written. All right, HB 516, new certification and regulation of structural engineers.
This was stupid because they just wanted to impose continuing education training and additional licensing requirements to allow someone to use the word structural engineer after their name or in their signature title or on letterhead or whatever. Hate regulations, hate regulatory committees, hate them all. Glad it was a veto. It'll come back because they didn't do what they were supposed to with the fiscal analysis and the state mandated review, but give those bad boys. It was also going to make them like a crime to, or not a crime, but like get fined if they use the term without state permission, which is makes me sick. So keep on using that term, people.
That word, I don't think you know what it means.
Yeah, I'm going to add it to my signature for the next year, just because. I'm a structural engineer of municipalities.
This was a good veto by a guy who worked regulating industries and committed to easing regulatory burdens. It was a good veto. It's something that he committed to when he was Secretary of State running for office. It was good. It was a good veto. All right, and we had a number of line items from the 2020 budget.
We'll put the link on the Facebook page.
Yeah,
there's a lot.
I think that's the best thing to do rather than
read you numbers.
Yeah, we're long as it is. All right, closing thoughts, Jessica.
I misspoke. I just want to correct something because I said that he vetoed another DeKalb bill, but he actually chose not to sign it, which is interesting. But because he chose not to sign it, it goes into law anyway. But he didn't want to make a decision on it, so I misspoke. But he did not get involved in the other DeKalb politics bill. So just for clarification.
Man, yeah, not my favorite use of the desk. I mean, if we elected Vernon Jones, I'd expect that.
Mm-hmm.
Come on the show, Vernon. You have fun.
We're waiting.
Jessica.
I just have a brief rant. I just want people to stop living in the past and stop going back to old music and old movies and old books and complaining about what's in them. This past week, there were articles going after John Wayne and his movies because of things he did that were perceived as, not appropriate against women and certain races and things like that. Like, the times were different. No, it's not an excuse if you find it offensive, but all you have to do is not watch it or listen. Just stop. Please just stop. I'm so tired of it. Like, there are so many more pressing issues in our country than what some actor said before most of us were even born. So, please, leave our movies and our music and our books alone.
Yeah, and that goes back to Tom Sawyer and everything else, and wanting to burn those. Look, you have to encapsulate that time in what it was. That's just stupid. It's just stupid. Even stuff that I watched as a kid. I mean, Pulp Fiction. They want to make offensive. It's just stupid. You're right. It's stupid. Good one. Okay, Florida man has had a rough couple of weeks. So Florida great-grandma got arrested at Disney for having CBD oil, not weed, in her purse. A Florida man in Lakeland, home of Publix, was arrested for having a sticker that says that he likes to barbecue donkeys. A Florida woman was arrested after hiding an alligator in her yoga pants. Talk about a snapper that'll get you. Florida man's had a rough couple weeks. Hey, Florida, why don't you back off the jean shorts just a little while? I mean, I'm a native Floridian. You're embarrassing me. So, as we close this out, please go out and rate us 4 or 5 stars, max amount of stars on the platform in which you choose. And give us feedback. Hit us up on Facebook if you can think of somebody who absolutely despises everything we say. Let's get him on the show. So, for Jessica Szilagyi, I'm Dave Roberts. Thank you very much. We'll talk next week.